Good day, folks. I found this interview very interesting, and it's with Newt Gingrich, who has ran for presidency once and did not succeed, but is profoundly intelligent in his own right. And so the answers, like when he's being interviewed and asked about President Trump, how he's sort of explaining and analyzing Trump's intelligence at different level. It's very unique and very it's just something that we are not aware of. We are not aware of it so far. I mean, it's good someone who knows him personally coming and telling us what he's like, how his thinking faculties and intelligence work. Anyway, without my trying to interject, I'll try to maintain my silence and let you watch this. So much the better. Thank you.
You put your finger on something. You could read every New York Times or Washington Post story ever written about Donald Trump, and not one will say he's very smart, but he is. So just talk more about there's different kinds of intelligence. How is he smart?
Well, he's smart at 3 or 4 levels, some of which I just literally don't have. One is he's essentially intuitive. That is, he absorbs an enormous amount of information. He is the most existential politician I've ever seen. Nelson Mandela would be probably the closest parallel. Everything Trump does is in the moment. He is totally engaged, totally involved, and he's sort of schizophrenic in that part of him is thinking strategically, while the other part is totally engaged with you. And so he absorbs stuff, and he's absorbing stuff all the time. When occasionally I have a conversation with him, I realize that there are 3 or 4 conversations going on simultaneously in one conversation, because he's thinking about this, and then he's overthinking about that, and things just flow. He is.
So let me just stop you there, because I just want to put a button on this because it's so important. One way he's intelligent, you're saying, is he has the capacity to think in the moment, talk in the moment, but be thinking about other things and kind of connecting them all up and processing them. Sorry, go ahead. Second.
And I think somewhere, and I think unless you understand this even better than I do because you're a New Yorker, and you went to school in Boston, which I picked up the other day. I thought was great. Moving from, people don't get this, moving from Queens to Manhattan is impossible. Nobody in the Manhattan elites is going to accept some newcomer from Queens who's brash and loud and rising. And so he spent his entire formative years being an outsider and wanting to be an insider. And I think finally concluding he ain't ever going to be an insider. So he'll just get to be so big, they would like to be inside with him. And I think there's a very key part of what drives him is that.
How does that speak to intelligence? Because I want to stay on that. Does that speak to intelligence?
Yeah, because think about it. He had to sharpen all of his skills, whatever he thought he knew coming out of Queens. He had to learn a whole new world, a whole new system. He describes some of this in his 2 best books, The Art of the Deal and The Art of the Comeback. And there's one line when he says that he was going to redo the building, which I think is Trump Tower, and they were going to try to keep the Art Deco front. And the New York Times loved it and was nice to him until the engineer said, that's $3 million extra. At which point Trump said he didn't like Art Deco that much. At which point the New York Times attacked him for 3 straight days. Well, he said the lesson he learned was he had lots of people suddenly call him and say, I didn't know you were doing condominiums. And his conclusion was any media beats no media. And bad media is better than no media. And part of it is, and this is what I mean by his intelligence, not only does he learn from you and me face to face or on the telephone or whatever, but in the back of his head, he's building models. He had to build a model of Queens kid, millionaire in Manhattan. And that was a model. This is how it works. So he's constantly looking. I'm sure right now, for example, with Putin, that he's very troubled. And every model he had for how it was going to work has failed. And he is grudgingly moving towards a level of toughness that will shock Putin. Because Putin is mistaking patience for timidity. And I've seen this over and over again. The other part of that, and I don't know whether it relates to intelligence, he is as much of an alpha male as anyone I've ever seen.
Yep.
I mean, you take, and this is what Harvard's learning, you take him head on, he will be compelled as an act of survival to take you apart. He'll have no choice.
The way I think that speaks to intelligence, and I'm going to give you a few others to comment on that I see, is he knows how to leverage advantages. He knows what advantages he has. He knows being an alpha is an advantage in most situations, and he sizes up and knows how to leverage it.
Well, he doesn't just know how to leverage. He thinks ahead and
Yeah.
understands that there are 5 or 6 different points going. So very often I find I'll be on point 3 and he's on point 11.
Right. I'll give you 3 others, and you can just say, yes, Mark, you're right, or you can say I'm wrong, or you can just comment on them. One is his ability to size up people is as good as anybody I've ever seen. He understands what motivates them. He understands how he can get what he wants from them. 2 is he understands the media as well as any politician I've ever covered. You're pretty sophisticated about the media. Barack Obama is. He's as sophisticated about it as anybody I've ever met who's been in elective office. He does not have a blind spot about the media the way Bill Clinton did, for instance. And then lastly is he gets politics. He gets what the traffic will bear on an issue. How far can he go within the Republican Party to lean towards being more pro-life pro-choice on abortion? How far can he go on dealing with Canada? He just understands what the traffic will bear.
Well, and remember, all of that's intuitive.
Yeah.
Although, as long as we're having this conversation about the media, can you explain to me his fascination with Maggie Haberman?
I can, but I won't. Part of it's the New York Times, but part of it is she pushes his buttons, and he wants her approval so badly. But I can't fully explain it. The three of us should. The three of us.
I don't know if he wants her approval or her attention.
Yeah.
But that's the funniest single dance
Yeah.
I see him do in the media.
Yeah. It's a pretty funny one. Josh Dawsey of the Wall Street Journal is someone else who he's pretty focused on, I'm told. But Maggie Haberman of the Times, second to none. And I'll just say to button up the thing about Trump's intelligence. One of the stories of Trump's success in the last decade is he's constantly underestimated, and you benefited from that at times too. His opponents underestimate, say, well, Gingrich, is too far right, or Gingrich doesn't understand this or that, and it allowed you to succeed. When I tell people Trump's smart, and I've said to people I know who are quite smart, you don't understand. Trump's smarter than you. You're very smart, I'll say to them, but Trump's smarter than you. And I've lost friends over saying that to them. And they should accept the fact that they don't know him, and they'll have a better chance of beating him if they deal with him on the terms of reality, which is he's a really smart guy.
In many ways he's parallel to Eisenhower and Reagan, both of whom consciously underplayed how really good they were.
Yeah.
Because they thought it was a net advantage.
Yeah.
And I think part of Trump's vaudevillian approach, and he's clearly a vaudeville performer, and part of that I think is a deliberate, how can you really be afraid of me? I'm just this funny guy.
Yeah.
And when watching him take apart Jeb Bush psychologically was one of the master classes in how really clever Donald Trump is.